Hey guys, welcome back to the Base Brief. This week, Obama warns against wokeness, Biden is attacking freelancers, we have some vegan vandalism, a Rocky Top football win, and is anime satanic? Let's dive in. All right, Brad, how was your weekend? Probably calmer than mine, I bet.
Yeah, I didn't have so much travel like you, all over the place once again. I want to point out to viewers that I'm wearing my new sweater that is actually a stencil of Reggie's face that my boyfriend got me, stenciled onto a sweater, and I love it.
That's amazing. Now you can always take him with you no matter where you go.
Oh.
Well, I'm glad you had a calm weekend. I have some big news, guys. I am no longer a Southwest fan after this last trip, which I know is a pretty big announcement for many people who followed me. I have fought for the death over Southwest in many relationships, and I have finally been proven wrong in my support of this airline. And it comes at an opportune time because I was already in the middle of breaking with Southwest and transitioning to be a Delta primary flyer because of being in Atlanta. That's their hub. You kind of have to be. And I want to go into the lounges, which are really nice. And you have to have a Delta boarding pass to get to the lounge. So it was already happening. But Students for Liberty, where I was going this weekend in Miami, they had already booked me on Southwest a few months ago to come down there. And so Logan and I got to the airport. We're going through security and we're supposed to fly at 2 p.m. And all of a sudden I get a notification that it's going to be 7 p.m. And as a very experienced traveler, that's bad news, right? When it just has a major delay, that big of a jump, I was like, uh-oh. And then within, 30 more minutes, they just straight up canceled our flight. They booked me on at 9 p.m. They booked him on a flight for the next day that had a layover in Houston that wouldn't get in until 6 p.m. Yeah. Yeah. So at this point, it's noon, and we're like, okay, so we had to cancel Southwest. I then went back out through security to get our bag from Southwest because I have pre-check. So I was like, Logan, you stay back here. I'll go in and out. And I get over to where our bag should be, and they're like, sorry, we sent it to Baltimore. Baltimore. I was like, what? Why? Anyways, we ended up booking on Delta. They got us there. They had no issues, even though Southwest was kind of trying to claim weather. Delta was able to get there, no problem. And finally, our bag showed up around midnight. To this day, Southwest is still calling me, being like, we don't know where your bag is. I'm like, I have it. But I'm going to let them worry about it a little bit longer just because I'm mad. So
that's hilarious.
That was my weekend. Fortunately, the rest of the LibertyCon experience was smoother than that. We did enjoy Miami, had some great Cuban food, but yeah, I think I'm in your camp these days, Brad. I know I've said it before, but I'm really trying to start limiting how much I'm traveling. I'm tired of this.
Yes, come to the dark side.
Yeah, and we just have so much to do with the launch of Base. There's so much I need to be home for. It's becoming stressful to be out there all the time. So, yep, guys, if you want to book us, better get in there soon because I'm saying no to most things moving forward. Anyways, Obama recently said no to wokeness, which was kind of a surprise to me. This is something that I thought he might go along with. But we have a clip to roll here of what he said, or we just have a tweet?
Yeah, no, we've got a clip here from an appearance Obama just did on the Pod Save America podcast where he warned Democrats against wokeness and against being buzzkills. Take a listen.
We do get into trouble. Look, I used to get into trouble. Whenever, as you guys know well, whenever I got a little too professorial and started when I was behind a podium as opposed to when I was in a crowd, there were times where I'd get sound like I was giving a bunch of policy gobbledygook, and that's not how people think about these issues. They think about them in terms of the life I'm leading day to day. How does politics how is it even relevant to, the things that I care most deeply about? My family, my kids, work that gives me satisfaction, having fun, not being a buzzkill, right?
That's a lesson for the Democratic
Party. Yeah, and sometimes Democrats are, right? It's like, sometimes, people just want to not feel as if they are walking on eggshells, and they want some acknowledgement that life is messy and that all of us, at any given moment, can say things the wrong way, make mistakes. Michelle talks about her mother-in-law, or her mother, my mother-in-law, who is a extraordinary woman. But as Michelle points out, she's 86. And sometimes, trying to get the right phraseology when we're talking about issues, Michelle's like, that's like her trying to learn Spanish. It doesn't mean she shouldn't try to learn Spanish, but it means that sometimes she's not going to get the words right. And that's okay, right? And that attitude, I think, of just being a little more real and a little more grounded is something that I think goes a long way in counteracting what is a systematic the systematic propaganda that I think is being pumped out by Fox News and all these other outlets all the time.
Okay, so it is not very often that I find myself agreeing with Barack Obama, but here we are. I think he's got a point about, ultra-progressive, cancel culture, social democrats really being a buzzkill and making you feel like you're walking on eggshells around them. Nobody likes that.
I love that he said this. To me, it reminded me of, there's good Obama and there's bad Obama in my book, right? And I think if you look at his policies, they're mostly always bad, but I'm talking about his public performance, his demeanor. And this was the Obama that built a new coalition that infused optimism into society, that had the ability to really be a unifier. And it's interesting to see him step back into this kind of phase, because for the past couple of years, it seemed more so like he was kind of in lockstep with the sort of punitiveness of progressivism and really just kind of condemning people who were different than him. This is sort of a turn in his language back to old Obama, and it was refreshing, I thought, to hear him say it. And I also thought he was just entirely spot on. He's very based in recognizing this, and I think that it's something that actually cuts across partisan lines, right? I think people often feel like it's the left versus right when it comes to cancel culture and wokeness, but I think there's a lot of people on the left that are fed up with it too, that are tired of feeling like they might lose everything because they misspeak on something, or because they're not up with the times, or because they don't realize a certain language or descriptor has fallen out of favor, and now there's a new one that you use to be politically correct. It's exhausting. People are tired of it. People are mostly well-meaning, and they're tired of this kind of threat looming over their heads all the time.
Yeah, and I think if we're going to do anything about cancel culture, because it is largely, not exclusively, but largely a left-of-center phenomenon in 2022, it has to be thought leaders on the left with credibility, like Obama, who, let's be clear, is still a partisan Democrat. In the same interview, he went on to complain about Fox News being 24/7 propaganda, right? So he's still Obama. He's still a hardcore Democrat. It's not like he's really shifting. But the fact that somebody from within the left of note is speaking out about this kind of thing, more people doing that is the only way. Bill Maher is another one, the HBO stand-up comedian and talk show host. These kind of left-of-center folks policing their own is the only way we actually get out of this, because, left-of-center people are never going to take their cues from conservative media or Republican politicians or anybody, or Libertarian. That's not who they take their cues from. I thought the other aspect of what Obama said here that was really valuable was when he talked about his mother-in-law. And how she's 80-something years old, and she's a great person, super well-intentioned, but doesn't always have the right verbiage. And I just thought that was such a good point, because we ask a lot of people, and this is who were born in times almost unrecognizable, who we've seen their values, just the society's values, radically shift over the course of their lifetimes. And then we're like, oh, but you're not up to date on the current thing, bigot. Cancel. Luckily, most 80-somethings don't have Twitter, because if they did, they'd get canceled, right, for the things they say. But I think it's just a good reminder of giving grace to others and not always assuming the worst or the terrible intentions, or trying to make the most outrageous thing that you can about something. Just saying, well, maybe they didn't mean any harm by that. And so. Look, is Obama always going to be the most consistent on this kind of thing? Sure, of course not. But it is good to hear it from somebody on the left.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I will say, it's especially hard for older people, but it's not just older people. Logan was referring to some the other day, and he used the term special needs, which, as far as both of us knew, was the correct PC term to use for people with disabilities, and got chastised for it by somebody on the very far left. It was that's not what you use anymore. And I had that happen to me all the time.
What do you use?
they said you should say they have a disability. And it's like, okay, but like, it's just one of these things where like, does
for
it
a while,
actually hurt?
disabled was like problematic. And they were supposed to be differently.
Exactly.
It's like, I can't even keep up.
I can't keep up, and honestly, I don't think this is what anybody who's actually disabled spends their time thinking about. I think it's ridiculous, and it's something where, like, I saw that on the left all the time, too. I had recently an encounter. This is a third-party thing that happened. I wasn't actually involved, but a friend of mine had this happen to her who works among the left as well, and they told her that she can no longer say lame duck, that this is an offensive term. And if you look up the origins of lame duck, it has nothing to do with anything within the disabled community whatsoever. But this person was trying to like make an attachment to it and say it was offensive to people who were disabled. And it's just one of these things where I feel like a lot of the time people are just looking for ways to be more woke, more progressive, more in step with what's PC at the moment. And it just is one of these things where it's like people are exhausted. They're trying to do the right thing. They have a million things going on in their lives. Like, not everybody can keep up with whatever the preferred language is of the day. And I'm not saying to not, try your best to be kind and try your best to especially if somebody asks you to refer to them a certain way or use certain terms. Like, sure, of course, I'm not a jerk. But the other extreme is when we start trying to cancel people or condemn them or go after them because they accidentally didn't know whatever the new term is you want them to use. And I think that's what he was referring to with his mother-in-law. And I think that actually spans all ages, right? It's especially hard for older people, but even younger people like me, I'm like, okay, I'm sorry I don't spend my days, in knee deep into progressive Twitter lingo world where this is what you have the luxury of spending your time thinking about. Like, that's where I think he's coming from. So again, not to say that Obama in any way is always consistent on these things. He's also been pretty punitive in his language at times towards people he disagrees with. But I think that we should praise this kind of language when we see it coming from people on the left. I know you and I both shared some of this. I think Jack actually wrote about it, or you wrote about it for BASEDPolitics. And there were some people that were like, well, Obama did this and Obama bombed these people. And it's like, yeah, we're not absolving Obama for all of his, many crimes while he was president. But again, like not everybody is all good or all bad, right? And I think that's an important thing to remember in political discourse, period, is to give people grace and to allow room for people to have, both bad ideas and good positions. Because I think that's actually the norm, not the other extreme.
So since we're on the topic of cancel culture, maybe I should just bring up and pivot to this for a second. For folks that don't know, I recently appeared on the Dr. Phil show, which was pretty cool. But the topic was about generational differences between Gen Z and baby boomers, and the topic of cancel culture. I was on stage with a bunch of like woke, very progressive Gen Zers. The topic of cancel culture came up, and I had this fascinating exchange with two far left TikTokers and content creators. Take a listen.
Stereotypes used in comedic stand-up is just simply like not okay anymore. So you can say whatever you want, but you need to also be ready for like the repercussions of what you say.
Okay, you're not free to say whatever you want if you get fired for an off-color joke.
Okay,
how would you feel when it's you who's out of step with the social mores of the
and
day?
then you get the repercussions of what you said.
I think you're still acting like this is something new, though. People have been fired.
Well, I'm not, but two wrongs don't make a right,
People have been fired for things that they've said for forever. But now we're seeing an era where if you're disrespectful or bigoted towards someone, you get fired for that. I don't see that as a bad thing.
But it's a lot more that's been caught up than just that.
The point is the threshold has really gotten low.
And I really want to address the idea that what's going on currently with regard to free speech is in any way normal. We checked our latest data on attempts to get professors canceled on campus. It's 770. It involves over 40 tenured professors getting fired. You didn't have these kind of numbers even during McCarthyism. So the idea that this is just business as usual is just wrong.
So this clip, Hannah, has gotten a lot of attention when I posted it on my various social media channels. And I think I understand why, but before I dive into my personal gripes and a few things I wish I'd pointed out in the moment there, I just want to know, what was your reaction to hearing them say cancel culture is nothing new and it's just accountability for your speech?
I thought it was exhausting. I mean, it cannot be both, right? If it's nothing new, yet it's progress. It's like pick a lane. I mean, I think the correct position is that cancel culture is nothing new. We've always seen people canceled at times over things they've said or have blowback for things that they've said. But I think, as Dr. Phil correctly asserts in this clip, the scale of that has changed, where it's no longer, people who've really done something wrong. Like, you beat your wife, yeah, you should get canceled. You should probably be fired. Like, you should have serious repercussions for that, right? You harm your child. Like, now we're looking at people who, again, use the wrong, preposition or the wrong adjective when they're using language. And I think that that's what we need to get down to, is that cancel culture doesn't just refer to blowback for things that you've said that are genuinely harmful or things that you've done that have really hurt other people. It's really being used more as a weapon for wrongthink and for people who are just somewhat out of step with wherever the far left is at these days. And that's kind of the measure of it, versus where I think it should be, which is, have you actually hurt people? Are you intending to harm people? And even when we get into that terrain, I think the better approach to dealing with people in that realm is to, especially if we're not talking about actions, we're just talking about words, is to try to counter that, right? Is to try to educate them, to try to come aside them and help them be better. Because I think there's times, like, if I had Twitter when I was, in high school, I would have said some really stupid things, like, good grief, there's no telling what would be out there. And it's because I grew up, like most people do, in a sheltered bubble. I didn't know people different than me. I had, probably stereotypes I believed about different groups. And that changes when you get to know people and have pleasant experiences with them. It changes when you are exposed to more of the world. That's the better way, I think, of handling that and getting people to grow. Because when you come in and shout them down, especially when you come in and try to take their livelihood, cut them off from society, that does not make people change their minds. It makes them dig in their heels and usually become a much more vile and reactive person.
Yeah, I agree with you. And a couple points on that is, one, some form of like cancellation and boycotts has always existed, but to pretend it hasn't exponentially increased with the rise of social media is nuts. Of course, it obviously has. And then, like they were saying, it's just when you're a bigot, you get punished. A lot has been caught up in cancel culture that isn't just bigotry. It's like minor infractions, but actually, let's dive into that. Because even when it is bigotry, here's a really good example. Kevin Hart was supposed to host some show. I can't even remember which one it was. And then some online Twitter people dug up tweets where he'd used the word faggot and said some kind of like off the cuff derogatory gay language in tweets from like 10, 15 years ago. Now that is a case where you're talking about bigotry. You're not talking about a minor infraction, but the reason it's still cancel culture is because it is wildly disproportionate and it is devoid of any context. Like in 2008, people still said that word every day in real life, nonchalant. In 2022, they don't. And I think that's a positive development. But I don't think it's fair to go back to statements made in 2008 and judge them on 2022 standards. I also don't think it's fair to determine that just because someone like Kevin Hart said a few, harmful things, that they're actually a bigot, when I don't think there's any reason to believe he's a bigot against gay people. If you look at his actual views, who he is in 2022, and it's like, that's what cancel culture is. Obviously, Harvey Weinstein deserved to be canceled, for lack of a better word. Like, there is some threshold here. But what typifies cancel culture, and what these Gen Zers on the left seemed unable to understand, is the disproportionate nature of the outrage. The way that it is stripped of any context, on social media mobs, and then it is all weaponized to shut down people rather than redeem them. And that, to me, I tried to make those points on the show, but you've just got quick sound bites and clips, and I wish I could have gotten a little bit more of that message in, because I think that's what people need to understand about this issue.
Yeah, that was kind of my reaction to watching it too. Is I obviously editing plays a big part in this, guys. When you go on TV shows like this, there's so much that gets left on the floor and cut out, and it's really hard to always get your points in. I thought you really shone in the moments that you were included, but I felt myself thinking this, and also a lot of people in my comments have said, like, we just wish you had like 10, 15 minutes, because you would come on and like you would really hit the actual core issues that are like really pressing things dividing boomers and zoomers, and then like you'd get a great clip in, and then they'd move on to another subject that was kind of less weighty. So I wish we could have gotten a bit more into the weeds on the subject, but I thought you did a great job covering it. And I think let's have to get back on. And one big problem too is like when she says, well, if you're a bigot, you get canceled. It's like, okay, but like you guys would call all kinds of things bigotry that have nothing to do with actual bigotry. And then you would ignore things that actually are bigotry, right? Like being bigoted is not just something that applies to having homophobic views. You can be bigoted towards all kinds of groups of people. And I would say many on the left are quite bigoted towards Republicans or evangelicals or anybody who's different than them and hold very, bad stereotypical views about them that are not always true and often want to like push them out of society for things they think. And like, so if we want to talk about bigotry, like I'd love to have that discussion or for you to have it and have a bit more depth on it. But yeah, I think you're right. They're just going to have you back because there's actually a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, I do hope I get to go back, and I would love to go back for something more political and more controversial. And really, I'd love to be in one of those episodes that goes viral like they did an abortion episode. And I wouldn't want to do that topic, but like something similarly spicy I would love to go back on for. So anyway, Hannah, for the independent contractors and freelancers who listen to this podcast, which is probably a lot more than you think, including you and me, there's some bad news going on. Some things aren't great, huh? Tell us about that.
Yeah, there's about 60 million of us, I think, in the U.S. last time I checked that are participating in the gig economy, as it's called, which could be, full-time freelance work. It could be that you have a side hustle. Either way, it's people who are getting paid by a 1099, right? Not a W-2, 1099, which means that usually you have to pay taxes out of that money. You're not getting benefits included in that most of the time. And you and I have both, I think, always had independent contracts. I've usually had a W-2 as well, but always had independent contracts. It's something I really credit with a lot of my, not only financial success, but my ability to forge a new career and build the career I have now without going back to school or taking on more debt. Had I not been able to do these things on the side to like get out of music and start, pivoting over into politics, I don't know where I'd be right now. So I take this very, very personally, and I think a lot of Americans do too, because there's reasons that people are increasingly joining the gig economy, leaving 9-to-5 W-2 jobs, and it's not an accident, right? There's a lot of stuff going on in the general business world right now that is just very behind the times, right? We don't see the market working as quickly as I think it would or should without government intervention into the way work is set up. But because you had government come in and like codify things like the 40-hour work week and insurance being tied to employment in the 30s. And these were, great progressive quote, quote achievements. You see a really stale environment in the general workforce of American businesses where they still won't give people remote work even when they can. They won't give people flexible hours even when they can. They continue to force people into old school 9-to-5 jobs when people, don't need to be sitting at a desk from 9 to 5 to do their jobs anymore. They have all these like time tracking things they're trying to do. And it's just really antiquated. And I think behind where we need to be as a society, and it's making people not want to participate. And I'll say that for myself. That's one reason. Like, I never want to work for anybody else full time again. You and I are really, really privileged and lucky, and have also worked very, very hard to create our own endeavors so that we can be our own bosses and start creating these kinds of jobs, because I think that's where the top talent goes. All of that to say, people who end up in these kinds of working environments as a whole are doing it because they want to get out from underneath the thumb of government, out from underneath the thumb of these like really old school, ridiculous work environments that do not make you more effective, that actually can reduce effectiveness. We've seen remote work actually leads to increases in productivity time after time after time, saves a lot of money, and also it allows people to spend time with like their kids and their families and be in the home, and the list goes on. The quality of life greatly increases. But the only people this whole new development is not working for, and we've talked about this on the show in the past, is the labor unions, right? They increasingly are really falling behind due to a couple developments. One, 28 states have passed what's known as right-to-work legislation, which basically just says you cannot be forced to join a union. You always have the choice, but you can't be forced to. And then we had a really great Supreme Court decision a few years ago known as the Janus decision that basically said public employees cannot be forced to pay into unions. What that means is that when people have not been forced to join unions, it turns out they don't want to, and unions now have the lowest participation rates in history in the U.S. So they are really hurting for money, and that means that Democrats are also really hurting for money because labor unions give significant portions of the money they collect to Democrats and their politicians and to the Democratic Party. And so because of all of that, we've seen an initiative from the left to try to come in and stomp out independent contracting. It started about 2 years ago in California with a bill called AB5 that came in and basically changed the structure for who can be labeled as an independent contractor or not. And what it essentially said is if the kind of work you're doing as an independent contractor is closely tied to the core work or mission of the company you're independently contracting for, they can't 1099 you. They have to hire you as a full-time employee. It becomes illegal to have a contract with you, even if the job they're hiring you for does not require a full-time job, even if that means you're going to get pushed out of work. That's how they came in and structured it. Now, it was very, very quickly a mass failure in California. A lot of people lost their jobs because, shocker, most of these companies cannot afford to come in and hire all these people they were independently contracting.
And a lot of them don't want to be full-time employees.
They don't want to be, exactly. And so it was a huge ordeal. Basically, voters came in and overwhelmingly passed something called Prop 22 that was trying to overturn AB5. All of that is still tied up in courts, but it has been a massive mess in California, okay, for many, many industries, especially like the trucking industry. A lot of these people are being really heavily hit. Journalists have been heavily hit because a lot of journalists who were freelancing for places like Vox all of a sudden could no longer freelance and write for them. But as big of a failure as it's been, Democrats have been working to pass this nationally ever since, which is, I think, one of the most disgusting things behind the scenes I've ever seen. I want to roll this clip real fast from Fox Business, where I thought they did a great job summing up what's been going on. Let's play that.
Why would you want to stop a student from being a part-time driver with Uber? You know, a little income on the side, choose your own hours, drive your own car. What is wrong with that? Nothing that I can see, but the president is having none of it. He's tightening the rules on independent contractors, gig workers, to use the modern word. They could be barbers, construction workers, freelance writers, home care workers. There are 20 million of them. They will be reclassified as employees, and that means they'll be able to unionize. That's what this is all about. Biden is the union president. It's like living in a time warp. It's so yesterday. A geriatric elite just cannot keep up with new, flexible, convenient working arrangements. So they bring down the union hammer and disrupt a host of new-style businesses. This started in California, of all places. The state, famous for its innovation, was the first to go backwards. 2 years ago, they disrupted Uber, which, ironically, is headquartered in San Francisco. Think of the politics of this. Biden needs union votes. Governor Newsom depends on union votes. So they bring in the Fair Labor Standards Act to beat up a vibrant sector of the labor market. Trump opened up the gig economy. Biden's trying to close it down.
Love that British accent from Stu Varney there. But I thought he did a good job of explaining the broad contours here. But it's nuts to me because Democrats are clearly, in the thrall of the labor unions. But that's a very different interest group than the actual laborers. Because let me just walk through a few things, right? For me to write a weekly column for the Washington Examiner and not be a full-time employee, but get nice side income, lots of flexibility, illegal under California's old law. For an Uber driver to also drive for Lyft and switch back and forth or work whenever they want rather than having a set schedule of hours, all impossible under these standards. And so they're like, well, they'll be able to unionize. It's like, well, a lot of them won't because they won't have jobs anymore because these jobs only exist in the fluid gig economy style. And what's really important to remember, too, is that people are choosing the gig economy. They could be getting, other jobs. There's plenty of unfilled jobs that have minimum wage and unions and all these things, and people are choosing the options that don't. What they're essentially saying is he's right. There's this geriatric nature to it. Like they don't understand the modern economy, but there's also this paternalistic nature to it, where they know better than you what's in your best interests, that I personally find revolting.
Yeah, it's very, very gross. I think it's one of the biggest attacks on individual liberty I can think of. I think the right to work is an essential right that we have. And within that entails the right to determine the kind of work you want to do. The last thing I need is the government coming in and micromanaging my schedule and setting the terms for which I can be employed. We've seen how that goes. And again, workers are choosing to get out from underneath that by going to the gig economy. We don't want that. If anybody wants a W-2, there are plenty of jobs open right now. They can go get one. That's not what's happening. And to say, well, they can unionize. People don't want to unionize. We see that as soon as they're not forced to, they don't. This is about trying to force people back into 9-to-5 jobs so that they can be forced to unionize in the states that have not passed right-to-work laws. That's first and foremost what's happening. Secondarily, and I don't know if they can do this. I don't think they can do this through the labor rule proposal they're trying now. But as they pointed out on Fox Business, this is something they tried to get done through legislation on numerous attempts, right? And it kept failing because, shocker, people don't want this. But what they were trying to do within that legislation was actually overturn right-to-work laws, which have been democratically passed in 28 states. Okay, let's be very clear about what their intentions were here. It's no secret. This is solely being done at the behest of the labor unions to try to force people back in. They know that they passed this rule. They can at least force them back in the states have not passed right to work, and they're going to keep trying to overturn right to work in the 28 states that have
so
passed
it's also
it.
an attack
their end goal.
It's also an attack on freedom of association, because right to work simply says that you have a choice whether to join a union when you want to work in a certain field. They would get rid of that and have it be, you want to work in this field, you must be a member of the union. That, to me, first has huge First Amendment problems, right? Like, a union is an inherently political organization, and forcing someone to join it in order as a condition of their employment, to me, violates their rights. But it also is just a complete violation of their freedom of association. It's also just nuts to me that at a time of economic malaise, right? When we have inflation, we're worried about a recession, all these things are going on. Biden's like, you know what we really need to do? Crack down on the people who are working. Make sure that their jobs can't exist as they want them to. It's like, this is just so backwards, banana nutso to me, this priorities.
Well, you're trying to restrict the number of jobs in the economy, which I think somebody very astutely pointed out in my comment section. You know, they're trying to restrict the number of jobs that are out there because this is part of their goal to get ahead of inflation, right? They want to start restricting the money out in the economy. And
but they won't restrict government spending.
Nope, not one bit. But you're absolutely right about the First Amendment implications here. And let's not forget Citizens United, which has ruled, I think correctly so, that spending money is a form of free expression and speech. And therefore, if you're going to try to force people to spend their money to join labor unions, it violates that law as well. So I think I would like to see the pro bono litigation community rise up a bit more extensively against some of this, because I think there are true constitutional grounds we can fight on. But this is very scary. This is concerning to me, both from an individual level, but also from an economic level, because, you know, not only would we see fewer jobs out there, but I think intentionally we would see less job growth. We would see fewer companies start up. It's really expensive to hire and retain workers. One way new companies can do that better is to go the independent contracting route and keep their expenses low, have more part-time people. And it's also just a more effective use of resources, right? Again, not all jobs require 40 hours, which the government came in and mandated for full-time employment. So if I don't need somebody to do a job for 40 hours, but I do need them to do it for 10 hours, what that means is I, as a business owner, then have to pretty much pick up the slack or overpay somebody for a job that should only take 10 hours. It's a very bad use of resources. It would create fewer companies being able to open, to stay open. It's an attack on small businesses. It's an attack on workers. It's an attack on the economy. And I'm so tired of anybody pretending at this point that all of this is not intentional. They hate us. They want us dependent on them entirely, and they will not stop. If given an inch, they're going to take a mile. And this is why, like, we've got to start fighting back on these economic grounds, because this is just becoming ludicrous. And ultimately, it means much less money for all of us, but also means so much less freedom and liberty and just quality of life, you know. And I think that's what makes me the maddest is I fought tooth and nail to not be in a gross old 9-to-5 desk job, and I never want to be in one again. I hate them. They may want to die. I'm too homeschooled for it. I was never conditioned to sit somewhere for 8 hours. I was not indoctrinated into that. Like, I cannot. I want to be able to go in, do my job really well, work the hours I need to work, make the money I can make, be able to determine that for myself. If I work really hard, I should be able to make more money. I shouldn't be trapped into a W-2 and a yearly salary. Like, all of these things just infuriate me. And I think that more people should be really angry, whether you're a freelancer right now or you're an aspiring business leader, or you're just somebody who thinks that people should be able to determine their own destiny and pursue the American dream as they want. This should infuriate you. And I'll leave it there. But it is a proposal right now, so you can submit comments on this online if you would like to. I think there's still a week or two left for that.
Let's troll their comment section.
Give them hell. Yeah, let's go raise hell about this, guys. All right. Well, you guys seem to really love our, what we're calling very online quick take segment that we did last week. So we're going to do another roundup because Brad and I we see lots of interesting things. We were thinking about making this a permanent addition to the show. If you like this segment, let us know, give us your feedback, but we've been having fun with it. So Brad, what are we doing first up?
First, we've got an update on the Sydney Watson American Airlines story from last week. If you remember, this was this crazy story of this conservative Australian-American YouTuber who complained on Twitter, and it went kind of viral, actually mega viral, like Daily Mail, Fox News have written about it, it's really blown up, that she was sandwiched between two extremely overweight people and was crushed and sweat on during her American Airlines flight in a middle seat. And she, and you and I largely agreed with her, thought it was unfair because she paid for that seat but only got about 30% of it because other people were occupying it, other people were touching her without her consent, and she was very upset about this, and I think understandably so. Her language was definitely hyperbolic, it was a little harsh at times, but you know what, she's got some right to be upset and uncomfortable. She's now received a response from American Airlines, who originally replied on Twitter and were just like, our passengers come in all shapes and sizes. But then they got dragged for that tone-deaf response. And they emailed her, and they wrote her an email that said, hello, Dr. Watson. I don't know why, but she has doctor in her username as a joke, but all these outlets and these places keep repeating it as if she's actually a doctor. It's like shows you the absolute state of American journalism. And they basically just apologize with very boilerplate language. And then they're like, as a gesture of goodwill, I have issued you a $150 trip credit. And so they're going to give her a gift card, basically. And they're like, hope this makes you feel better. Bye. I don't know. I mean, get that bag, boo. Take the money. But I thought it was just a kind of weird response.
Here's $150 to fly our shitty airline again after your shitty experience you had the first time that we did nothing to resolve. Like, no thanks. This is somebody was telling me I should call Southwest and like basically try to get some money out of them over my experience. I'm like, why? Because I don't want to fly the airline again.
You can sell,
like, I'm good.
Can you sell
I'll be
the
on
gift
Delta.
card?
Right, it's just a gift card, I guess. But no, usually it's attached like your name. You have to use it under your own. So this is just bleak. But I really do, like, when I saw this, it is so maddening to me. I'm so tired of bailing these losers out. They should be allowed to go under. That's the only reason these airlines still exist. And like, it's really just, I think, such a great example of the failures of government if you look at the airline industry, because these people truly, across airlines, like, they do not care about customer service. They are not afraid of competition. Everything just keeps getting worse and worse and worse with travel. Like, it's to the point where it's not even fun anymore. You know, after I went to Paris the other week, I was just like, okay, it was fine. But honestly, it was such a hassle. It was such a lift to get there. Like, I'm kind of good just staying domestic from now on. I'm kind of good, like, not traveling as much. Like, increasingly, and I'm somebody who's a very high volume traveler, and I'm somebody who, you know, used to love travel, but it's just become so unpleasant. I feel like I'm in like an episode of Survivor every time I go to the airport. Like, what's going to happen to me today? Am I going to get my stuff, right? Am I going to have space on the airline? Are they going to pick up the trash when they're supposed to? I mean, can I get a water? Like, it's just ridiculous. So I think this is maddening that they got our money. That's what I just keep going back to and looking at this.
Some might even call it satanic, because some people like to throw that word around like candy on Halloween. And that brings us to our favorite conservative right-wing shock jock host, Matt Walsh, who we're big fans of over here, because he is back on the internet making waves. He's just addicted to the spotlight. He's got to say something new every week to get some attention, and here we are giving it to him. So, got us. He called anime, which is a Japanese cartoons, basically, satanic. Take a listen.
What's your opinion on anime? It's really popular amongst teens and young adults. I think it's all satanic. I have no argument for it. I have no argument for why it's satanic. It just seems that way to me. All anime to me seems weird, just like bizarre, creepy. And in general, I don't think that adults should be, whether it's anime or any other kind of cartoon, with rare exception, adults really should be watching cartoons in general, I would say.
So I thought this was pretty dumb, partly because anime is just a category of art. It's like some anime content might be satanic or like disturbing, but a lot of it's very benign. It would be akin to saying cartoons are demonic or satanic, which it's like, well, doesn't that kind of depend on the cartoon?
This literally made me laugh out loud when I saw it come across my Twitter feed. I was like, does he just play Mad Libs every morning to figure out like what he's going to like put together to be outraged about? Like, sir, what? But also it kind of is sad to me because I think he probably just does this for clicks and attention, like you said. But I think there are like some people who get very indoctrinated in the American far right church and like really start to think this. And like, I grew up with a touch of it. We didn't go around calling everything satanic. Like, to me, satanic is that's what made it so funny. I'm like, that's so hyperbolic. It's up here. Like, satanic has an actual definition. And if they're not like actually practicing the worship of Satan, I'm pretty sure it's not satanic. But one thing that would happen to me a lot as a kid is that especially things in like pop culture and art would get referred to as being new age. And to this day, like, I've never heard anybody outside the sector that I grew up in use that term. I'm not sure if you've ever heard it, but like they would call like Harry Potter was considered new age. Or like my sister still jokes that she wasn't allowed to watch Powerpuff Girls when she was a kid because it was new age. And like, I was asking my parents about this recently. I said, what was new age? Like, did you guys make that term up? Where did you get it? I don't understand. And it's sort of just this all-encompassing term to refer to sort of the esoteric rise of Eastern European religion in the US. And like, you know, it can be anything from the use of crystals to like Ouija boards to witchcraft, who knows, but that's what I would hear. And like, none of it really ever made any sense, to be completely frank. It really was just ridiculous.
I've just never understood how people like Matt Walsh can have such strong opinions on things that literally don't affect them. Like, I get having opinions on things. I'm a very opinionated person, but I can't imagine having the strength of the opinion that he has on things that literally have zero impact on you whatsoever. It's also, so he does this thing where he later tries to claim he's kidding, but it's like, are you though? Because, or that he's tongue-in-cheek, but then also double down on it. So he's since tweeted that actually he thinks all cartoons are demonic, satanic. And that adults, with rare exception, should never watch cartoons of any kind. And I'm like, all right, that's just stupid. Like, South Park is one of the best shows, and maybe that would count as his exception. I don't know. But it's like, a cartoon is just a medium. It depends on the content, right? Like, South Park is, children should not watch South Park, let alone adults. Only adults should, actually. So I don't know. I just don't get why he's got to get so worked up about these things that don't affect him. And also, like, I would love to know, how much anime has Matt Walsh consumed? I'm thinking not much, to be honest with you, because so it's opining on stuff that doesn't affect you and you have so little experience with. It just sets you up for this kind of outrage attention, like we're giving him now.
Yeah, I mean, I can't not react. It's just so ridiculous, the things he says. At this point, I'm just kind of amused. All right, well, moving on from anime to a subject I actually do care about. I want to talk about college football. As most people know, I'm an Alabama fan, grew up that way. I don't follow it as closely as I used to, because honestly, I'm just working a lot on the weekends these days. But I did catch our really big game this past weekend. If you're not familiar, one of Alabama's biggest and oldest rivals is the University of Tennessee. And we play every third October. And this year the game was at Tennessee. And for history's sake, if you're not up to speed, Tennessee has not beat us in 15 years, right? We have just been dunking on them for 15 years. And they finally were able to beat us this past Saturday. It was a very close game. Came down to like literally the last second. A field goal. It was crazy. I was like watching the elevator on the way down to the dinner I had to be at for SFL. And I wasn't even mad because honestly, like 15 years is a pretty good running streak. And also my best friend, Drew, who's a huge Tennessee fan, who I've been to many Alabama-Tennessee games with, was getting married this weekend. So I felt like it was a nice wedding present from me to him. So I was pretty, okay with it. I'm not crying like I used to over Alabama football losses. But one thing I did see over the weekend, and keep in mind, like Knoxville, their whole life is Tennessee football. People love the University of Tennessee there, even though they've been so bad for so long. They've been a very devout, loyal fan base. So this was like, probably the next best thing to Jesus coming back for most of these people in Knoxville, Tennessee. They tore down the goalpost. My whole timeline, because I lived in Tennessee for 13 years, was flooded with orange. But I saw this video on Twitter I want to play real fast of a church this past Sunday celebrating the win by singing Rocky Top, which is not only the anthem of Tennessee, but also the official football song of the University of Tennessee. So let's play this real fast. So nothing super heavy to comment on here, but I thought it was kind of funny because this is just something I've observed in churches, especially in the Deep South, particularly like the Bible Belt, and with that being said, Southern Baptist churches, because that is like 80% of the churches in the Deep South. There's just this interesting like conflation of one's religious experiences and opinions with things like their politics and their football. Like, I love Alabama football, but would you ever catch me singing like Roll Tide at church, like, or, you know, Rammer Jammer at church, which is our fight song? Like, no, I would not. And I just thought this was
I think it's definitely,
kind of weird.
it's definitely seems a lot more harmless than the politics infusion in the church. Like when they're, you know, very opining on very political, like who to vote for and these kinds of things that they're not really supposed to do in the churches, or when the candidates come speak at churches. That I really don't like. This kind of thing, I get what you're saying, but I also think it's pretty harmless. I mean, if the community...
Well, let me remind you that people do get shot and get in fights over football down here, so it's not always harmless. Like, it can be a pretty, like, AstroTurf kind of subject. But you're right. Like, it's not... You know, they're not violating any laws here like I would say they are when they start bringing in political candidates and getting, you know, into partisan politics. But to me, like, I think it says a lot about the state of the American church. I just do, where I really feel like increasingly, this is one reason I've had a hard time plugging in as a Christian, like, it's not about actually like going out and being the hands and feet of Jesus and actually like doing things to give back to your community. It's not even always about showing up and actually worshiping God or learning about God. It's sort of just become this like identitarian sort of social club that a lot of people go to, and they tend to go to church with people who are just like them, who look like them, who think like them, who have the same political affiliations, who root for the same football teams, right? Like, even by singing this at church, you're assuming that everybody at that church is happy Tennessee won, right? What if somebody's actually there and they are, I don't know, they're a huge Alabama fan and they're like actually interested in God and they get to this church and they're singing Rocky Top? Like, to me, it's just something, if you really cared about reaching people and helping them, like, you take into account. But this is just something I observe. Again, there's much more serious issues in the American church, but I just wanted to kind of elevate a little bit of our culture and things I observe down here in the South that I see happening in religion that I think are interesting. So, speaking of a trend that actually is harmful to people, there is apparently a new trend of vegan vandalism sweeping the UK. We've seen a few incidents of this on Twitter recently. Notably, in this one store, they're targeting milk. I'm not really sure why it's specifically milk that they're going after, but this says milk pours are currently happening across the UK. They're concerned individuals. They're calling the government to give us a livable future, #plant-based life. And they have a video of their activists in a grocery store just dumping milk onto the floor.
Yeah, we actually have that. Let's roll this tape because they say some interesting stuff in this video. Take a listen.
It is responsible for more greenhouse gas emissions than the oil giants like Exxon, Shell, and BP. The top 4 dairy companies are responsible for the majority of methane emissions. We want to see people protesting on violence and just pulling out the injustice of an industry. Milk is not suitable for human consumption. When cows are taken from their mothers, when baby cows are taken from their mothers, when mothers are forcibly impregnated. This is a peaceful protest against the company and animal rebellion and are taking direct action to pull out the dairy industry. We are not violent.
We've done every means, other democratic means, they don't work. We've tried voting, we've tried writing petitions.
So I'll just say it. I think that they should have to pay for every single jug of milk they just poured out, and if they don't, they should be arrested because that's theft. That's somebody else's property.
Okay, my favorite part about this video, though, is you have these two girls who are, like, dumping out the milk and, like, they're giving their talking points. And then you have what looks to be a hostage with them, this little boy. And he's holding a plant-based future sign, and he just kind of keeps stepping, like, further away from them, like, as the video goes. Like, clearly he's not sure he wants to be involved in this. That's hilarious. But, yeah, I'm with you. This is actual vandalism. Like, they should have to pay back the... Not only should they have to pay for the milk they spilled, they should have to pay to clean it up. Like, what the heck? You can't just come in and ruin other people's property because you don't like what they're selling.
I found it hilarious because their whole points are about the climate and they say it contributes to carbon emissions. They also say it's like not fit. So this is from a group called Animal Rebellion. They're like saying we shouldn't be drinking milk. They want us to drink plant-based milk. And okay, I actually mostly drink plant-based milk, or I guess is oat a plant? I don't know. Oat milk.
It's a nut.
But
no, it's a wheat.
Who knows? That's not the point. It's not dairy, right? But I do that because I've been convinced that it's better for me, and then I've been sold on the taste also being better. What cracked me up about this clip is when they go, we've tried traditional democracy, we've voted, we've written letters, and now we're doing this radical protest. And it's like, you tried traditional democracy, and you failed. You didn't convince almost anybody. And then your solution is, well, let's go be obnoxious, make a mess, and pour milk on people's shoes while they're trying to get their groceries. Yeah, that's really gonna help your cause, bud. I mean, these people, I don't know if they just don't care and they're willing to self-sabotage their cause for clicks and social media attention, or if they're just completely clueless. Because this is like activism 101. Don't make yourself a nuisance to the people you're trying to convince.
I think it's the latter, and I've seen it a lot in the States as well. And I've often said, people don't like protest movements at large, and that's because they aren't done that well anymore. And it's not to say that protest movements have ever been very popular when they're happening, but they have been done more effectively. And the way it's been effective is when it is peaceful, nonviolent civil disobedience, right? Where you were actually rebelling against an unjust law in a peaceful way that does not harm people or hurt their rights. And I think a really, obviously an amazing example of that would be the lunch counter sit-ins of the 1960s, right? They weren't popular. They had people burn them with cigarettes, police kick in their heads, but they were effective. They changed the tide in American culture and perception around racial issues because of how they were strategically implemented. You don't see that same intentionality around protest movements today. That's why I think the BLM protests were such a catastrophic failure in 2020, even though they originally had a great deal of support and a just cause. They were so badly organized, so badly handled that got away from them. And I think this is the same kind of thing. We're going to create more backlash. Like, people like me could be convinced to go after Big Dairy. I hate Big Dairy. I think it's super corrupt. They do all kinds of lobbying. They get our tax dollars. They push their product back on us through really weird, crony ways. So, like, I'm, not for climate reasons, but, like, screw dairy. But, like, this kind of thing is, like, maybe
what if somebody
milk?
Pours milk on your expensive shoes? That's going to convince you, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. These kids, they're just...
I'm out.
I don't know. I'll be curious to see how that pans out for them. But they're not the only radical activists doing some bizarre forms of protest. We've also got people who actually went and found at the National Gallery in Washington, D.C., they tried to defile a painting from Vincent van Gogh by throwing, let's see, what is this? Oh, throwing cans of soup on the portrait, on the painting, and then gluing themselves to the wall as part of a climate protest. We're going to roll a video. There's not much audio here, so we won't put this in the audio podcast. But just, there's these two activists, one with pink hair, of course, and they're throwing this soup, and some guy's like, security, get security, and then they're super gluing themselves to the wall. I have questions, but take a watch to this video.
Security.
So, Hannah, my first thing is, what did Van Gogh do to earn the ire of climate activists?
I'm really not sure. Also, I did not know you could super glue yourself to a wall. There's a lot of questions that I have about this, but I think this is what happens when you have government schools telling kids the whole earth's going to blow up in 2 decades if you don't do something, right? You break their brains and you get people doing these kinds of stunts. It's like, what in the world are you doing? You look like a crazy person, but clearly you think that it's dire, times. I don't know. To me, like, it also is a little bit sad because I think so many people do feel powerless in their own system. Like, they don't actually know how to affect change or be effective or get people to like join their cause. And so you get this kind of ridiculous display. The whole thing is just, it's gross and absurd. And again, destroying people's property is never okay and never going to help your cause
Thankfully,
at all.
it didn't work. So it didn't work. They apparently didn't even take 5 seconds through their research, but there's actually protective coverings over the paintings. So they basically just had to clean off the soup. It didn't actually destroy the painting, but I agree with you, though. It's like they have been misled by alarmist people, whether it's Greta Thunberg or AOC, to think that we're all going to die in a few years. And you and I both believe climate change is a real problem, but the alarmism has repeatedly not come true and is exaggerated far beyond the facts. And there are solutions we could actually pursue, but they've just scared people into oblivion. I also think it's really funny, our friend Austin Peterson, and we can flash this on the video, he put together a climate protesters starter pack. And he went through hair dye made with oil, graphic tee made with oil, bright color sneakers made with oil, super glue made with oil. Just everything they use in this climate protest is made with oil, which is just really funny.
I love Austin. He's always got such great takes. All right, guys. Well, that concludes our quick take segment. We're going to move on to the comment section, so I hope you enjoyed that. But I am laughing at this first comment, Brad. I have no idea who this is. But Catherine Frieden said, Brad Polumbo looks like Rami Malek's ass baby, but his commentary is on point. We're going to need to flash a picture for the video version here because I don't know who Rami Malek is. Do you?
I'll text you a link. He's an actor, best known for the show Mr. Robot.
I mean, you both have big eyes. That's really about the extent of the similarity I see here.
I'm not sure I want to know what an ass baby is.
It sounds really painful. I definitely don't think I want to know.
Yeah. No thanks. Next comment says, what's your opinion on Tulsi Gabbard's statement and leaving the Democratic Party? I loved it and thought she so eloquently stated her reasons in a clear, concise way that made so much sense. So I actually have some thoughts about this. And people who've been following me for some time know that in the past I was a pretty big fan of Tulsi Gabbard, and I still like her. But I do have some questions about her current transition, because I watched her video announcing why she's leaving the Democratic Party, and I agreed with most of it. A few parts I thought were cringe, like when she talked about anti-white racism. I'm sorry, I just don't believe that's a widespread thing at all. But a lot of it I agreed with, right? Huge problems with the Democratic Party. But now she's gone and she's now campaigning for a bunch of like MAGA Republican candidates. And I'm like, hang on, you said that you were going to be an independent, but you've actually just seemed to flip sides in a way that makes me confused because you still have or had a lot of progressive values, supporting government health care, supporting gun control, being pro-choice. And it's like, I get why she would leave the Democrats, but I'm hoping she's not doing a 180 on a lot of her values, because that to me would not be a mark of integrity that she's displayed in the past with her service and her other things that I found commendable. I'm a little bit worried she's doing a flip-flop here beyond going independent, which I completely understand.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I get wanting to be independent. That's why I am as well. And I do think she's been very, very consistent on foreign policy. She's great on that subject. I haven't seen a lot of consistency from her elsewhere. I mean, this is somebody who had very far left views on many things. I've really never understood like libertarians and the right rallying around her, other than the fact that I think she effectively swung at Kamala Harris during the debates and called out Kamala's bad record.
She did. She roasted Kamala.
She did. She had a great debate performance, right? She did really well, and I thought it was really gross to see how Democrats smeared her at that time. They tried to call her a Russian asset. You had Hillary Clinton going after her. And so I think she's done a good job, fighting back against some of these people in the DNC and also like standing her ground. But this is a woman who supported the Green New Deal. This is a woman whose economic policies are very far left of center. This is a woman who is very anti-gun. I've never understood like rushing to like be on Team Tulsi. Like, to me, she's kind of, she's like many other politicians for me. I'm like, I could find, maybe 40% of things we could agree on, and then we're going to adamantly disagree on 60% of things. It's just never done it for me, and I agree with you. Like this, leaving the Democratic Party I get, but then running to campaign for Carrie Lake, who's, a pretty far-right candidate, just seems kind of opportunistic, and it doesn't make a lot of sense to me at all. So I'm going to reserve my opinion, I think, and just keep watching. Just keep watching, but it seems weird.
It seems like the right word, because she just reportedly compared Biden to Hitler in comments that she made. And she's become a big critic of the Biden administration. We both heard her speak at the Young Americans for Liberty conference, and I really liked a lot of what she had to say, but she was praising the Second Amendment, which a few years ago she was voting for gun control bills in Congress, so it just seems to have been this evolution. I was Team Tulsi, but I liked her because she was a progressive who spoke out on issues that I agreed with her on, and I thought she was consistent and principled. And so she's actually getting closer to my positions on things, but simultaneously alienating me a little bit because it's feeling less authentic. And we have to remember, folks, she endorsed Joe Biden in 2020. And so now I see her emerging as this super far out there critic of Biden. And I'm like, hang on, he's exactly who he said he was. He has been somewhat more progressive than I think we thought because he was running as a moderate. But his campaign agenda wasn't moderate. And he's been a bellwether who just moves to wherever the party is his entire career. It's like, he was the establishment, and now she's railing against him. And I agree with her, mostly. But I'm like, I don't know, there's just a degree of inconsistency here that's starting to take the shine off my Tulsi fandom.
Yeah, well, Jack, you and Jack and I were talking about this a little bit, and Jack kind of pointed out, like, Glenn Greenwald is somebody who is, wars become his main thing, and civil liberties. Those are his two top things, and he's really never moved on other issues. He's just actually been consistent. The Democratic Party's moved on him, and I think because of that, he's become more and more isolated from it. But you don't see him running to the other side and saying, all right, let me promote Republicans, and so it just feels more authentic to me. This feels a little out there. I'm just not sure what to think. So I'm going to keep watching and see. I mean, I'd love to see her have honest, authentic change on things like gun control and realize she'd been wrong. We always want to see progress from people. But I'm just always a little wary of anybody who's been like in lockstep with one party who all of a sudden runs out and becomes like the water boy for the other team. It just looks a little sus to me. So.
Well, to be fair to her, I don't think she was ever in lockstep with the Democrats. She was always an independent. But she has pivoted.
She was in lockstep enough to run as a Democrat, to endorse a Democratic candidate, to, she won races as a Democrat. That's pretty much like you're in with them pretty hardcore, more than the average voter. So, yeah, that's what I mean by that. But you're right. She did always break with them on some issues. Although when she became a Democrat, they were more anti-war, I can only assume, and they have moved on that. So, all right, next comment is from Allison. It says, love your podcast. I wish you did it twice a week. We need more young libertarian realists like you guys. On the fat person plane issue, not sure what the federal rules are, but I'm guessing they make the airlines accept people without forcing them to buy another seat. Airlines are very regulated by the federal government, so maybe they have no choice. But the bigger issue is, why are there so many overweight people? America didn't really get fat until after the government started giving official nutrition advice in the 1970s. Also, we subsidize crap like soy and corn. Great points, Allison. Yes. She's absolutely correct.
I will point out that the federal government doesn't force them to sell just one ticket to overweight people. In fact, some airlines have a policy requiring you to purchase 2 seats. So they could, I'm not sure, American might even have that policy and simply didn't enforce it. So that part of it is not, I think, applying to this case. But the rest of the comment, yeah, I mean, I definitely agree that the airline industry is super regulated, and not just for safety, which as somebody who's afraid of airplanes, I'm not going to complain about being extra cautious on safety regulations, but it's far beyond that. And then in terms of the obesity epidemic, we'll have to do a whole nother podcast on that. But absolutely, it's multifaceted with many factors. But one of them is the nutritional misinformation, to use their favorite word, that our own government has put out. The idea of what is healthy that I was taught as a child in public schools and with the FDA slogans and the stupid food pyramid is so wildly inaccurate that I've unlearned it. But a lot of people didn't have access to the resources and support that I did. So I can see why they might not have and may make unhealthy decisions and not even fully be aware of it. So I completely agree. That's a big part of the problem. As far as podcasts twice a week, we are considering that. But let's just say, to be determined how the podcasting schedule changes. There will definitely be more content for you overall now that we're full time. But the exact shape that's going to take is still in the works. So stay tuned, Allison.
Stay tuned, and also if you have feedback for what you're looking for, let us know. We're starting to work on what the next year is going to look like, how we're going to be spending our time, what kind of content we need to most step in and fill the void on. So if you've got ideas, if you've got requests, let us know. We'll take it into account, and we love the feedback. All right, on to our hot takes. I have one that is impacting me today. Brad, you don't drink, so you've probably never had this happen to you, but alcohol delivery services are expanding rapidly, and I love that fact because I hate running errands, hate shopping, hate all of it, and more so you can have stuff brought to you, so it not only makes it easier, but you can have really great things delivered from other states. So if you love a wine you try in California and you want to get a subscription to that vineyard, they'll send you wines once a month. The one big problem with this is that they always send these alcohol deliveries in the middle of the day, and you have to be home to sign for them. Which, like, why? What does that do? How does that in any way make sure nobody under 21 is drinking alcohol in my house? It doesn't. It doesn't matter. It's such a ridiculous hoop we have to jump through, and I just think it's annoying. So I have to sit here all day and wait for this delivery, which is fine because I work from home now. But when I used to not work from home, I would have to, like, have the alcohol sit to my office and then carry it to my car and then unload it. It was a huge pain. I just think it's a really silly
Why can't you just buy alcohol at the store?
You can, but when you're having alcohol delivered, it's usually like a specialty delivery. So, like, we have some special wines coming in.
Okay.
Yeah, like we have some wines from out of state coming in today.
Look at you, bougie.
You know me.
So, my hot take is that people need to stop interviewing deranged famous people solely for clicks. So I watched yet another interview with Kanye that is going viral, and it's an absolute hot mess. The network and the host very clearly only did it because they knew it would go viral, and it did. But yet, there was some pushback, but essentially all they did was allow him to ramble incoherently for 20 minutes and then to spread borderline blood libel about Jews twice in the interview. Saying that Jews in his industry get away with literal murder and then not expounding whatsoever. And so at some point, you're using your platform irresponsibly if you're just interviewing people who are completely detached from reality. And I know it will get you 2 million views and your videos normally get 50,000 or whatever, but is that really worth your credibility and your soul? I don't think so. Personally, and
what are you achieving?
Clicks.
Yeah, what are you achieving when you do that? Just clicks. And honestly, I think using a mentally unwell person to get to that point, right? Like, it's not like you have some policy goal you're trying to achieve and Kanye is just really going to help you and it's worth, like, throwing him out there because it's going to get this greater good. No, you're just looking for clicks and you're taking advantage of somebody who needs medical help. It's gross. All right, guys, that's a wrap for this week. Stay based, and we'll see you next time.